Welcome to Understanding the Bible with Pastor Stephen. This is episode 49, Church Part 4, the Tabernacle. Now, last time we had covered the sacrifices since Adam and Eve's time with Cain and Abel and all that, and the sacrifices in the law of Moses with the Ten Commandments. And we discussed God's purpose with sacrifices was to show the penalty for sin, death. Had to sacrifice, kill the blood of an animal to actually pay for the sin. And of course, it led us to Jesus Christ and his ultimate sacrifice and understanding the need for that. So this time we're going to be covering the purpose of that first church building, the tabernacle in the wilderness, the role of the priest. We'll be covering Exodus 25 through 40, and I'm not going to give you all the details. It's like 15 chapters. So I'm just going to give you a few highlights. Read it for yourself if you want to get into the specifics. And then one thing to remember when you do read it, and it's talking about the measurements of things, they usually use cubit, and that's roughly 18 inches or a foot and a half. So I just wanted to briefly give you that detail if you're interested in the dimensions of the different things. But let's go ahead and get started. Why was the tabernacle built? Well, let's start out in Exodus 25, verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, that they bring me an offering of every man that gives it willingly with his heart. You shall take my offering. And this is the offering which you shall take of them: gold, silver, brass, blue, purple, scarlet, fine linen, goat's hair, ram skin dyed red, badger skin, shittim wood, oil for light, spices for anointing oil and sweet incense, onyx stones, stones to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate. So here we're talking of precious stones. And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show you, after the pattern of the tabernacle, and the pattern of all the instruments thereof, even so shall you make it. And then if you go all the way to the end, Exodus chapter 40, verse 26, and he put the golden altar in the tent of the congregation before the veil, and he burned sweet incense thereon, as the Lord commanded Moses. And he set up the hanging at the door of the tabernacle. And he put the altar of burnt offering by the door of the tabernacle of the tent of the congregation, and offered upon it the burnt offering and the meat offering, as the Lord commanded Moses. And he set the laver, or that's your washing dish, between the tent of the congregation and the altar, and put water there to wash. And Moses and Aaron and his sons washed their hands and their feet thereat. When they went into the tent of the congregation, and when they came near unto the altar, they washed, as the Lord commanded Moses. And he reared up the court round about the tabernacle and the altar, and set up the hanging of the court gate, so that's the walls. So Moses finished the work. And then verse 34, Then a cloud covered the tent of the congregation, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to enter into the tent of the congregation, because the cloud abode thereon, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And when the cloud was taken up from over the tabernacle, the children of Israel went onward in all their journeys. But if the cloud were not taken up, then they journeyed not till the day that it was taken up. So that's the reference to knowing when to pack up and move during the 40 years that God was punishing them and making them wander in the desert because of their unbelief in entering the promised land. But that's a whole nother story. Then verse 38, For the cloud of the Lord was upon the tabernacle by day, and fire was on it by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout all their journeys. A couple of definitions I wanted to cover. First of all would be sanctuary. That's the Hebrew word mikdash, which is a consecrated thing or place. Some of the words that are translated this in the English language is palace, chapel, holy place, or sanctuary. So this word is used like over 100 times in the Old Testament. And this is one of the first times it's used here, is describing the tabernacle, called a sanctuary. So consecrated means to set apart for a specific purpose. And if you don't know what holy means, it's basically a way of describing divine or godliness. It also means exalted or worthy of devotion or perfectness, goodness, righteousness. All of those things is what holy means. Then we have the word tabernacle, which is the Hebrew word mishkan, which is residence, dwelling place. And some of the words that are used in the English Old Testament is temple, tabernacle, habitation, or just tent. So all of these things describe the sanctuary, the tabernacle, that first place that God had the Jews make for his presence. And of course, the purpose was pretty clear there in Exodus 25, verse 8. It said, "Let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them." So this was literally for God to live among his people. After how many decades, centuries, thousands of years had passed, I think it was about 1600 years. I'd have to go back and refresh my memory on that since the Garden of Eden. But the point is, it'd been a long time since God had walked and talked with his people. So here it was. Once again, God is saying, look, I created you to live among you, to talk with you. And now you're going to be able to have that again. You're my chosen people. Now, the tabernacle was made to be portable as God led them to the promised land. So I'm not saying it was easy. It was very heavy. There were so many parts to it, but it could be taken apart. They had the different stands for the wall made out of silver, and the brass plates and all kinds of things to set things on and to build this wall, and the way things hooked together. It's all described in there if you want to read it. And it was that way for a very long time, even after they got to the promised land, until the time of Solomon, when Solomon's temple replaced that tabernacle, and he built for God a permanent dwelling place that was greater than Solomon's temples, or Solomon's palaces even. Let's take a look at what it actually looked like, because there's a couple of things I wanted you to note in here in regards to this tabernacle. It was very pretty and it smelled good. God clearly enjoys beauty. That's why God made the things that he did in this earth, like the different precious stones and metals and things. That it's very clear in reading the Bible that there is a commonplace thing like dirt and stones and wood, and then there is beautiful, fancy stuff that is rare, like gold and silver and precious stones. And you can also clearly see that Jesus uses that in preparing the new Jerusalem that comes down out of heaven when it's described in the book of Revelation. There's just so much to show you that God actually does enjoy beauty. And I think he's implanted that in our heart. And that's why we see those things as beautiful and precious. They have an inherent value to them because they are special. They are more beautiful than the common things. And that's what God wanted his tabernacle made out of. He chose what to use for the tabernacle, not Moses. So it's very interesting. I'll just read a part of it for you in Exodus 26, verse 29. He's telling Moses, "And thou shalt overlay the boards with gold." All the things that were made of wood had to be plated with gold. "And make their rings of gold for places for the bars, and thou shalt overlay the bars with gold. And thou shalt rear up the tabernacle according to the fashion thereof which was showed you in the mount. And thou shalt make a veil of blue and purple and scarlet and fine twined linen of cunning work, with cherubim shall it be made. And thou shalt hang it upon 4 pillars of shittim wood overlaid with gold. Their hooks shall be of gold upon the 4 sockets of silver." Just a brief view of one of the things in the tabernacle. Notice the colors too: the blue, purple, scarlet, and of course the fine tapestry, the cherubims that were made on it. And it's just, everything is very ornate. It's clearly not common materials. This was wealth, and this is also important to remember that God knew they had. The Egyptians had given it to them. God even told the Egyptians to give of their wealth, that this was going to happen. If you read earlier in Exodus, God didn't make his people, the Israelites, poor just to make his house look good, but he did require the best of what they had. So that's very interesting to note that. So the dwelling place of their creator ought to be holy and set apart, worthy of God, right? That's just common sense. You don't invite the president or the king to your house and you give him the worst seat in the house, and you give him bread and water while you serve your family a feast. That's not how anybody does anything. When someone of importance is there, you give them the best of everything. Now, the other thing about this is it smelled good. I find this very interesting for a couple of reasons, but I wanted to describe the smells here. Exodus 30, verse 22. Moreover, the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Take thou also unto thee principal spices of pure myrrh, 500 shekels, and of sweet cinnamon, half as much, even 250 shekels, and of sweet calamus. This is a type of grass that is similar to lemongrass. And it says 250 shekels. And of cassia, also known as Chinese cinnamon. It's a spicy, sweet smell. So very different from cinnamon, and this is sweet, not bitter. 500 shekels after the shekel of the sanctuary, and of oil, olive, a hin. And thou shalt make it an oil of holy ointment, an ointment compound after the art of the apothecary. It shall be an holy anointing oil. And thou shalt anoint the tabernacle of the congregation therewith, and the ark of the testimony, and the table and all his vessels, and the candlestick and his vessels, and the altar of incense, and the altar of burnt offering with all his vessels, and the laver and his foot. And thou shalt sanctify them, that they may be most holy. Whatsoever toucheth them shall be holy. And then upon man's flesh shall it not be poured. Neither shall you make any other like it after the composition of it. It is holy, and it shall be holy unto you. So a very special oil, sweet smelling. Verse 33, Whosoever compoundeth any like it, or whosoever putteth any of it upon a stranger, shall even be cut off from his people. That's pretty serious right there. He's saying you're no longer a Jew if you make this oil and put it on other people, or even make it for yourself in your own home. Verse 34, And the Lord said unto Moses, Take unto thee sweet spices, stacte, which is the liquid form of myrrh, and onycha. I probably am not saying these right. I apologize, but it's an aromatic substance that comes from the shell of a mollusk from the Red Sea. I Googled it, and it says that it's a salty mineral type scent. And then the other thing they added to it was galbanum, which is an herb from the Middle East. That's also a resin, kind of like myrrh, but it has an intense green scent to it, smelling of fresh life and plants. These sweet spices with pure frankincense, of each shall there be a like weight, and thou shalt make it a perfume, a confection after the art of the apothecary. I don't know why I'm struggling with that word today. Tempered together, pure and holy, and thou shalt beat some of it very small, and put of it before the testimony in the tabernacle of the congregation, where I will meet with thee. It shall be unto you most holy. And as for the perfume which thou shalt make, you shall not make to yourselves according to the composition thereof. Again, that warning, don't do it for yourself in your own home, just for you to smell good. It shall be unto thee holy for the Lord. Whosoever shall make like unto that to smell thereto shall even be cut off from his people. So they have this holy oil that smelled good, and they had this holy incense. So it's clearly something that God enjoyed. Now, you may have some scientific reasoning behind it for medicinal benefits for the priests in the temple that smelled this all day long. I don't know. It may have just been a smell to mask the blood and death of all the sacrifices. Or they're wandering in the desert for 40 years, the sweat and the stench of the priests. I mean, I don't know why God did it, but he said it was for a sweet smell, and it was clearly for God alone, because notice the threat twice to not put it on their skin or make it for themselves. It's only for the temple. So it's very interesting the way God set these things apart for himself. Now, the tabernacle itself was in several sections. There was a courtyard, a holy place, and the most holy place, everything surrounded by a wall. So the outer courtyard had an altar for sacrifices and that laver that you heard mentioned for priests to wash before entering the tent, the covered area. And you may have seen pictures of this, a great, huge rectangular tent with a big wall going around it. and that open common area in front. So the tent itself, what we would typically view as the tabernacle, was considered holy. That was the holy place. It's described in Exodus 25 and 26. Let me just read a bit of that to you. Exodus 26, verse 33. And thou shalt hang up the veil under the taches, that thou mayest bring in thither within the veil the ark of the testimony. And the veil shall divide unto you between the holy place and the most holy. And thou shalt put the mercy seat upon the ark of the testimony in the most holy place. And thou shalt set the table without the veil, and the candlestick over against the table on the side of the tabernacle toward the south. And thou shalt put the table on the north side. And thou shalt make an hanging for the door of the tent of blue and purple and scarlet, and fine twined linen, wrought with needlework. So in the holy place, outside the veil, but still in the covered area of this tabernacle, was the table of showbread, the candlestick, the altar of incense. And at the back, in chapter 26, it talks about this veil that separated the most holy place. So this, when the permanent temple was built, was considered the Holy of Holies. In Exodus 25, starting in verse 17, it describes some of that. And it says, And thou shalt make a mercy seat of pure gold. 2 cubits and a half shall be the length thereof, and 1 cubit and a half the breadth thereof. And thou shalt make 2 cherubims of gold, of beaten work shalt thou make them in the 2 ends of the mercy seat. And make 1 cherub on the one end, and the other cherub on the other end. Even of the mercy seat shall you make the cherubims on the 2 ends thereof. And the cherubims shall stretch forth their wings on high, covering the mercy seat with their wings, and their faces shall look one to another. Toward the mercy seat shall the faces of the cherubims be. And thou shalt put the mercy seat above upon the ark, and in the ark thou shalt put the testimony that I shall give thee. And I will meet with thee, and I will commune with thee from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubims which are upon the ark of the testimony, of all things which I will give thee in commandment unto the children of Israel. So this ark of the covenant was where the priests, the high priest, and Moses spoke directly with God. Deuteronomy 10, verse 4 through 5 explains that the 10 Commandments was put inside along with the law of Moses. And then Aaron's rod in Numbers 17:10 was put in there. In Hebrews 9:4, it tells you a golden pot filled with manna was put in there and preserved forever. And in Hebrews 9:7, it explains that only the high priest went in there, presumably only once a year, because at least in Jesus' time, that's what it said they did. I assume that in Moses' time, it was far more often because they were so used to having the Shekinah glory, God coming down as a cloud and speaking with them and filling that tabernacle. So I'm assuming somebody communed with God on a regular basis, probably Moses. But by the time Jesus came along, it was only the high priest and only once a year, and they didn't have the Shekinah glory in there anymore. It was just ritual. But here's a cool thing about this Ark of the Covenant in the Holy of Holies. Read Revelation 11:19. It's in heaven now. Now, what about the priests? The priests had a specific look about them. And this is pretty cool. Let's read Exodus 28:4. And these are the garments which they shall make: a breastplate and an ephod and a robe and a broidered coat, a mitre and a girdle. And they shall make holy garments for Aaron thy brother and his sons, that he may minister unto me in the priest's office. And they shall take gold and blue and purple and scarlet and fine linen. And thou shalt take 2 onyx stones, and grave on them the names of the children of Israel, so the 12 tribes. 6 of their names on one stone, and the other 6 names of the rest on the other stone, according to their birth, with the work of an engraver in stone, like the engravings of a signet. Shalt thou engrave the 2 stones with the names of the children of Israel. Thou shalt make them to be set in ouches of gold, or settings of gold. And thou shalt put the 2 stones upon the shoulders of the ephod for stones of memorial unto the children of Israel. And Aaron shall bear their names before the Lord upon his 2 shoulders for a memorial. Then verse 15, and thou shalt make the breastplate of judgment with cunning work. After the work of the ephod thou shalt make it. Of gold, of blue, of purple, of scarlet, and fine twined linen thou shalt make it. And thou shalt set in it settings of stone, even 4 rows of stones. So here's the 12 stones for the 12 tribes of Israel. The first row shall be a sardius, a topaz, and a carbuncle. This will be the first row. The second row shall be an emerald, a sapphire, and a diamond. The third row, a ligure, an agate, and an amethyst. The fourth row, a beryl, an onyx, and a jasper. And they shall be set in gold in their enclosings. And the stones shall be with the names of the children of Israel, 12, according to their names, like the engravings of a signet. Every one with his name shall they be, according to the 12 tribes. And thou shalt make upon the breastplate chains at the ends of wreathen works of pure gold. And then verse 30, and thou shalt put in the breastplate of judgment the Urim and the Thummim, and they shall be upon Aaron's heart when he goeth in before the Lord. And Aaron shall bear the judgment of the children of Israel upon his heart before the Lord continually. Now there's a whole study on the Urim and the Thummim, and I have no idea how those work. I believe it's completely spiritual. You can call it magic if you want, but it appears on reading scripture that when they sat in judgment, they consulted these 12 stones, and there was a light that would light up inside the stone of the one that God had picked. And I don't understand it. I just know that this was the way they judged the people of Israel and decided who was at fault for certain things. So again, here that goes into their purpose with the priests. Number one, they were holy priests, and number two, they were judges. As priests, they were to serve as an example of holiness, to offer sacrifices for forgiveness of sin. They were the mediators between the sinful man and a holy God. They would speak to God for his people, and they would listen to God to find out what to tell the people to do. Then they were judges to help Moses make decisions of guilt and innocence. Remember, this was before they had kings. It was God told them directly. God led them. It was a theocracy ruled by God, and his priest would be holy and wash properly and do everything so that they could meet with God and figure out how to run the country. So they gave people direction. They executed God's judgment. Sometimes it meant they executed people. Quite literally, these priests were judge, jury, and executioners. So there you have it, guys. That's the temple and the priests of God in the Old Testament. The purpose of the first church building was pretty clear, for God to dwell among them. And I call it a church building because that's kind of what we do now is we simulate that tabernacle and the priest of God giving us God's word. It's not quite the same, and we'll get into that next time, but this building was to be different than every other building. It was to be beautiful, set apart from the common. That's kind of where I feel we might fail in our churches. Maybe some of the Catholic churches are more like these tabernacles, but the priests were to look different, dress different, act different. The priests were set apart to teach and to help people get right with God. Next time, we'll look at the coming of the Messiah and how he changed things from this system of hardcore justice with sacrifice and the rod of iron, outward actions where you have a method of doing things to seek forgiveness from God, and the hard laws that he set. The Messiah changed things to focus on love, mercy, the inward heart versus outward actions, the grace of God. That's what we're going to get into. And it's pretty fascinating how God set this up in the Old Testament to show us how bad sin is and how difficult it is to become holy and blameless before God. Until next time, may God bless you. Hey, I just wanted to tell you guys happy Thanksgiving. Remember this Thanksgiving season, the original holiday, 1621, when the Pilgrims came over here, that first Thanksgiving. Listen, the whole purpose, don't let the modern media and everyone lie to you about it. Our country was founded for godly purposes by godly people. And that first Thanksgiving was to thank God for bringing Squanto and the other Indians into their lives, who saved them, basically, helped them plant and hunt and survive that year. They had a harvest. Considering the previous year, they landed in December 1620. Only about half of them survived. They died from disease and cold and lack of food. So this first harvest was huge for them. So remember that when you do Thanksgiving, at least make mention of it to your family. Let's pass on the traditions of thanking God for important things on Thanksgiving, just for our mere survival. Heck, maybe even for this election and actually helping our country survive another year. Maybe we'll be able to fix things, pray for God's protection. But it's very important that we do honor God and give glory to Him for the freedoms that we have and the land that we have and the ability to even just eat like the Pilgrims did back in 1621. And hey, I wanted to thank you especially for supporting this podcast. Click the link, the button that has the little $sign on it that says support this podcast on Spotify. I would really appreciate your gift, $1, $5, or $10 a month. It goes a long way to help keep this going. And just remember, I'm not asking for an offering. I'm not demanding that anyone pay. This podcast will be free. I'm never going to charge to have it. But those people who do support the podcast financially really help me and my family just to get by in these times. And I really appreciate it. Hopefully it will help me whenever I have to buy new equipment as far as computers and speakers and microphones and all of that. But you've been a blessing to me. These gifts that you guys do give, every once in a while somebody drops off, and I get that. But I've got 11 people that still support me, and that is a great benefit to me. I'm making about $70 a month, but it really does pay the small bills, and every once in a while help me do something specifically for the podcast, like the camera where I do the bunny rabbit. Now, I know that's not much, guys, as far as being able to see the bunny rabbit, but nobody wants to see my ugly face anyways. So I just figured it would be something fun that you can stare at if you are watching the video instead of actually looking at me just droning on another talking head, So I hope you enjoy that. I'm going to play with the bunny for just a minute here, and thanks for listening. God bless you all. Come here, Lola. Come here. Come here. Good, Lola. Yeah, you like having your head scratched, don't you? Good, bud. Yeah, good, Lola. See, when bunnies flop down like that, that usually means they're happy. So sometimes she'll do the bunny jumps, little bunny hops, which is really cool. She'll jump in the air and kick all 4 legs out in midair. And it's pretty funny to watch. But anyways, you guys have a great day. Thanks for listening.